All right, what's up, guys? So, last video of the year, I want to do this one on safely removing road salt from your car. So, I just got back from a road trip. My car is covered in salt. I couldn't stand to let it sit. So, I'm going to go through the products and talk through the process of safely getting your car cleaned, especially when it's like this and again, covered in salt. Now, I would have liked to have made this a wash and talk, but it's freezing out, it's windy. And quite frankly, I just kind of wanted to zone out, catch up on the last Tim Dillon episode, get this thing cleaned up. And I still thought it was worth making a video out of this, so hope you don't mind the narration. Okay, now for the products that I'm using today, I have some Kochemi Multi-Star N, which I'm going to dilute to a 1 to 10 dilution for my foam cannon, and also P&S Brake Buster undiluted, and both of these are going to be for the wheels. Then I have some Built Hammer Touchless and Kochemi Gentle Snow Foam for the paint. For the Built Hammer Touchless, I'm going to put about 250 to 280 milliliters in a 1 liter foam cannon. And then for the Gentle Snow Foam, that's going to get about 150 milliliters and the rest with water to the 1 liter line for the contact wash foam. Also, not pictured on the cart here, but I have some Car Pro D-Scale that I'm going to use in the wash bucket as part of the contact wash, and then some Meguiar's Hyper Dressing diluted 1 to 4 that I'm going to use for the tire dressing, but we'll get to that in a little bit. And finally, if it's not too cold, I'm going to use some Obsessed Garage drying aid. I always like to finish with the drying aid. Currently, the paint has 0 protection on it, so this is just kind of like a little holdover fix until I'm actually able to do a full decon and get the paint protected, but I always like to finish with drying aid one way or another. All right, now first up with the wheels. Now I kind of like to treat this like the paint when they're this dirty. So again, car hasn't been washed in about a month, and I just, came off the road with all kinds of salt and crap all over it. So I don't want to just hit it with a pressure washer and run the risk of having all that stuff scratch up the finish a little bit. It would be probably microscopic, but nonetheless, I still don't want to do that. So for the Multi-Star N, I'm going to spray this stuff on or foam it on, let it dwell for about a minute or so, and then rinse it off. And that's going to get rid of the majority of the contaminants and the grime on the wheels so that I can then use the P&S Brake Buster and actually start using some of the wheel tools to get them clean. All right, so now that the Multi-Star N has been foamed on, dwelled for a minute, and rinsed off, we're going to foam on some P&S Brake Buster, liberal amount, let that hang out for a minute, and then start with the tools. A little recap on the wheel tools that I tend to use. I have the large and small easy detail brush, the Detail Factory brush for like the center cap, the lug nuts, around the valve stem, and then I have a lambskin wheel mitt that I got from Obsessed Garage for doing the actual, like the face of the wheel, and then the Tough Shine tire brush. So it's a little excessive, but it's a great mix of wheel tools that does a great job of making sure that everything gets super clean. In general, if I'm not rushing, it takes me about maybe 15 minutes a wheel to get everything really, really clean. Maybe a little bit extra time since I'm adding in the Multi-Star, and I don't usually use this. I usually just do the P&S Brake Buster. I usually just rinse the wheel off and then hit it with the P&S Brake Buster. But like I said, because it is so dirty, I wanted to do a little pre-foam with the Multi-Star N. So here is a before and after. As you can see, man, they come out super nice. Everything gets really, really clean. Speaking of after, here's a shot of the exhaust tips after they got done. These were somewhere in the gray color family between all of the salt and then just the grime that was mixed on top of them. But man, they do clean up nice. I've really come around to these blue tips. Rip to the easy detail brush. Had this for 5 years now. It lasted 5 years. The handle just snapped, but man, it was a good run. All right, now let's talk about the Built Hammer Touchless. Now, this is a product that I just started using earlier this year. Finally got a chance to try it out, and I love it. Plenty strong. It's about a 12.5 pH, I believe, as opposed to something like the Multi-Star N, which I think is like 13.6. So like that, like I said, that stuff is hardcore, but this as a pre-foam is fantastic. And in order to figure out how much you're supposed to use, I'm not going to go through all that here. Check out the video that I did on this a little while ago if you have not already. But I'm going to sort of guesstimate, like I said earlier, to about 250 to 280 milliliters of product, which seems like a lot, but I'm thinking that's going to be about right for where I am with my whole setup. So I'm going to foam this on, let it dwell for about 4 to 5 minutes, and then we'll rinse off. So the reason, if you're kind of new to detailing, the whole reason that you would want to use a pre-foam before foaming again with something like a pH neutral foam for your contact wash is so that you don't scratch the paint. It's kind of like I talked about with the wheels and starting with the multi-star N in order to get all that initial grime cleaned off. That's what you're doing with the paint here. If I were just to hit this with a pressure washer, just water with, no soap or anything on it, then as the water kind of, skids all of that dirt and grime and salt, particularly off the car, there's no lubrication in water. So you're kind of scratching, not the paint directly, but the clear coat on top of it. So the reason that we use a pre-foam is in order to encapsulate all the dirt, all the salt, everything like that. Something with a higher pH that has a higher cleaning power, it's going to sort of dislodge as much grime as it can from the paint and then have it run off the car. And this is why you don't really want crazy, shaving cream thick foam for doing something like this, because you don't want the foam with all of the contamination to just sit on the paint. You want to foam it on and then have it kind of run off. So that starts the process of breaking up all the dirt, running it off the car, and then you come along after a few minutes of dwell time, you come along with a spray, and that's going to get probably, and I'm guessing here, but let's say like 80-90% of the crap off your car. And then when you come along and do your contact wash, that's just all the less amount of stuff on your car that you're not going to be wiping into the clear coat and scratching it. All right, and now for the contact wash. So like I said, I got about 150-ish milliliters of gentle snow foam, and then the rest of the way for a 1 liter bottle with the water. So I'm going to foam all of that on. And by the way, I'm using the active foam cannon. So this was my favorite when I did the foam cannon testing. And even at the time, even though it didn't have the best foam quality, I think the best was all of them using the 1.5 millimeter orifice. The best was the MJJC SV3.0 of the ones that I tested, but I set this one up with a 1.35 millimeter. And as you can see, the foam quality is much, much better. So this is exactly where I wanted the quality to be for the foam, the amount of foam. This is my go-to now. Now for the contact wash bucket, I always squirt a little bit of the gentle snow foam also in the bucket. I never measure, I just kind of eyeball it, just drop a little bit in, enough to get some suds going. But I'm also adding, like I mentioned earlier, about a capful or so of the CarPro D-Scale. So D-Scale is another fantastic cleaner. It's good to mix in with your wash bucket. You can also do this in your wheels bucket too. It's really good for cleaning up like mineral deposits and spots that you have maybe left over. And since the car really hasn't been washed in over a month, it's been sitting outside in the elements. So in addition to all the dirt and everything like that, we have, whatever rainstorms and just dirtiness that have been accumulating and sitting on the car for over a month now. So adding a little bit of that D-Scale is going to help break up all of that stuff that has just been dried and then wet and then dried again, sitting on top of the paint. One thing I would note about adding the D-Scale to the bucket, which I actually don't usually do, it's something that I'm just kind of trying out. I would note that it makes the suds in the wash bucket so much foamier. Right? So like I always use roughly about, even though I kind of eyeball it, I always use roughly about the same amount of gentle snow foam when I squirt that in the bucket for the contact wash. And I would say the consistency of the suds is always about the same, but adding a little bit of the D-Scale, it's like it just 5x'd the amount of foam that was in the bucket. It was crazy. So that was kind of a cool, unexpected plus. Now, when you're washing the car, again, if you're new to detailing, always a good idea to start at the top and work your way down, right? So even though we did the pre-foam, we're still going to have a little bit of grime and stuff like that at the bottom. So you don't want to mix and match. Like you don't want to, wipe at the bottom and then bring it up to the top, because you're just transferring what little grime is still down there to the top where there's going to be less. So what I like to do, I'm using a Microfiber Madness Incredipad XL, by the way. This thing is fantastic. I love this thing. So what I'll do is I'll start at the roof, right? Go up to the half that I can reach, and then maybe do like the windshield or the back windshield, flip it over, do the other half, and then rinse. And I'll end up usually maybe doing about 1.5 panels or so, 1.5 to 2 panels, depending on how dirty the car is, in between every rinse. Now, because the car is a lot dirtier here, I'm gonna obviously rinse more often, but nonetheless, you can still cover a good amount, flip the pad over, do a little bit more, and then rinse, and again, work your way from top to bottom. So after the roof and maybe the front and back windshield, then do the hood, the rear, the trunk, the sides, the doors, periodically rinse, and then finally end up at the very bottom, going along like the side skirts, the front bumper, the rear bumper, everything like that. And again, that is going to make sure that you localize the dirt and not transfer anything from bottom to top. And finally, do not forget the door jambs and around with the trunk, right? So if you notice, especially when it's rainy, tends to attract a lot of dirt and stuff like that right when you open the door. And of course, on the exterior of the door, like on the top, on the underneath and stuff like that. So last step, you're gonna get your wash media, whatever that is. Again, I'm using the Incredipad XL. Give it a good rinse and then get all along the door jambs, underneath of the door and around the weather stripping. Don't worry about getting this area wet, especially on the inside. If the fabric gets wet a little bit, not a big deal. We're gonna come along at the end here, clean and dry everything up with a microfiber towel. Now for drying the car, I always like to use the leaf blower. I have an Ego, what is this? It's like a 530 leaf blower that I've been using for years now. I don't really like to use towels. I tested out the really big Geon towel earlier this year. It's actually really good. It did a fantastic job. I think that would do in a pinch if you were somewhere and you didn't have a leaf blower, but you know, whenever possible, I like to do anything contactless. Now, you don't have to get it 100% dry. I go for just whatever I can with particular focus on like crevices, right? So in and around the mirrors, you know, particularly around like the door handles and the trim, around the wheels and everything like that. Anywhere, especially around the front where like the grill is, everywhere that it's going to be hard to get a towel, you want to focus on. So, you know, the top of the paint, especially if your paint's not protected, the water isn't going to come off really easily, but you're not going to worry about that too much because we're going to finish this off with the drying aid. Again, hopefully it's not too cold. It's freezing right now, but we're going to finish off with the drying aid. And so that's going to take care of any little bit of water that's still on top of the big panels, like the doors or the hood or anything. But the leaf blower, again, concentrate on areas where it's going to be hard to get a towel in there. All right, now after the leaf blower, I'll go through with a microfiber towel. I have a separate one that I use specifically for door jambs. I don't really apply anything here. I mean, you could, you know, you could even do a little drying aid here. I typically don't. I just kind of clean everything dry. But everywhere that we got with the wash media, with the doors open, we'll follow back up here with the microfiber towel to get it all nice and dry. And the last step here, actually second to last step, I almost forgot to mention the wheels. We'll get to that at the end. Second to last step here is the Obsessed Garage drying aid. Now, like I said, I always like to finish with this. This is always the last step that I do. It doesn't matter if the paint is protected or not protected. I always use a drying aid. And, you know, my paint is not protected and this is barely a Band-Aid, but still definitely worth doing. Plus, it just adds a tiny little bit of pop, a little bit of glossiness to the paint. It makes it look really, really good. And it's just barely not cold enough for this to actually still work. The colder it is, the harder it is to buff this product in. But, you know, that's the case with a lot of different products, not just this one. So I'll spray usually 2 to 3 sprays per panel. And I have 2 different microfiber towels that I'll use. I have like a high pile towel that I'll use to kind of work this stuff in. And then I'll come behind it with a low pile towel, this orange one, to sort of buff off any little bit of the residue. And I generally apply the same principle to this as when doing the contact wash. So I'll usually start on the roof, the windshield and everything else, and then work my way down. And yes, you can use this on glass, trim, paint, everything. It'll work on any surface. And then for the final product, and this is for the tires, in order to do a tire dressing, I use hyper dressing diluted 1:4. Right, so I've been using this formula for years. I used to use this in the engine bay too until I discovered Kokemi Motorplast, which is like my new favorite product for the engine bay. But for the tires, again, hyper dressing diluted 1:4, and I'm spraying this on I believe this is a Detail Factory curveball brush. Again, I'll link it in the description, but I'll spray it on this brush here and then just go around the face of the tire, do a couple of passes, and then it just naturally dries and it looks great. Like with the hyper dressing, depending on, I don't like a glossy tire. I hate wet looking tires. So with the 1:4 dilution ratio, I feel like that's a really good amount to get like a nice, you know, finished sheen on the tire, but it's not aggressive. It's not overly shiny. I think it's just the right amount, but that's very subjective. All right, and now we are officially done. So the car looks fantastic. Like I said, it is freezing out. I had to get all this stuff off. I couldn't let that salt and all that grime just sit on there. It was driving me crazy. But anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Hope you got something from this. If you are learning how to detail, if you live in the Northeast or the Midwest and you got to deal with this stuff and you're looking for some product ideas and a process on how to do this stuff safely without scratching your paint, hope this all helped you. And again, links to everything that we talked about in the description below if you want to check it out. And if I timed this right, I believe it is New Year's Eve. So hope you guys had a great Christmas. Hope you have a safe and happy New Year's, and I will catch you in the next one. Thanks for watching. And by the way, this is not snow. This is snow foam. This is frozen snow foam. I told you guys it was cold out.